Brant Williams, 68 years old. That's me. Spent my life building a construction business with these weathered hands. 4 decades of sweat equity gave me a comfortable retirement and a luxury property portfolio. But nothing prepared me for the knife my son Jackson would twist into my heart in the beautiful $2.5 million house I gifted him. Sometimes children need expensive lessons about respect and gratitude. Let me tell you what happened. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, hit subscribe, and settle in for a story about the true cost of ingratitude. I was born in 1957 in a tiny town outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My childhood home was a modest 3-bedroom ranch that housed 6 of us: my parents, my 3 siblings, and me. Dad worked at the steel mill. Mom cleaned houses for the wealthy families on the other side of town. We weren't poor by any means, but we certainly weren't rich. Every dollar mattered. From age 12, I worked odd jobs around the neighborhood, mowing lawns in summer, shoveling snow in winter, helping local farmers with harvests in fall. I learned early that hard work was the currency of respect in our community. By 16, I had saved enough to buy my first beater truck, a 1970 Ford F-100 that I fixed up myself. Construction called to me naturally. I loved the satisfaction of building something from nothing, of standing back at the end of a long day and seeing physical proof of my labor. After high school, while friends went to college, I apprenticed with a local builder named Thomas Grant. He was a tough old son of a gun who rarely offered praise, but he taught me everything from framing to finish work. For 5 years, I soaked up knowledge like a sponge, worked 14-hour days, and saved every penny. When I was 24, I met Eleanor at a friend's barbecue. She was studying to be a teacher, smart as a whip with auburn hair and a smile that lit up the room. Everyone said we were mismatched, the college girl and the construction worker, but we just fit. 6 months after we met, I asked her to marry me. A year later, she became my wife. With Eleanor's encouragement, I started Williams Construction when I turned 25. The early years were brutal. I worked sunup to sundown, bidding on small renovation jobs, slowly building a reputation for quality work and fair pricing. Eleanor kept the books at night while grading papers. We lived in a tiny apartment, saving every extra dollar to grow the business. Success didn't come overnight. It took 10 years before I could hire my first full-time employees, another 5 before I landed our first major commercial contract. But by my early 40s, Williams Construction had become one of the most respected builders in the region. We specialized in high-end residential and commercial projects, with 20 employees and millions in annual revenue. Jackson came into our world when I was 35, and Eleanor was 33. Our miracle baby, the doctors called him, after years of trying. From the moment he arrived, that boy was the center of our universe. Eleanor and I agreed we'd give him everything we never had, but also teach him the value of hard work. As the business grew more successful, so did our lifestyle. We moved from our starter home to a beautiful 5-bedroom colonial in an upscale neighborhood. Jackson attended private schools. We took family vacations to Europe, but I always made sure Jackson spent summers working construction with my crews, learning the business from the ground up, just like I had. When Jackson turned 16, our world shattered. Eleanor was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. She fought like hell for 2 years, but the disease was relentless. I lost my beloved wife when Jackson was 18, just before he left for college. Those years after Eleanor passed were the darkest of my life. I threw myself into work, expanding the business to neighboring states, taking on larger projects. In a way, the company became my second child, something to nurture in Eleanor's absence. And Jackson, away at college, drifted further from the hard-working values we had tried to instill. I paid for his business degree at an expensive private university. When he graduated, I welcomed him into the family business with open arms and a generous salary. By then, Williams Construction had grown to over 100 employees with annual revenue exceeding $20 million. I hoped Jackson would embrace the legacy I had built for him. At first, He seemed eager to learn. I started him in project management, planning to teach him every aspect of the business before eventually handing over the reins. He married Amanda, his college sweetheart, when he was 27. They gave me beautiful twin grandchildren, Lucas and Lily, now 5 years old. When I turned 65, I decided it was time to step back. Jackson was 30, with several years of company experience under his belt. I made him chief executive officer, but remained chairman of the board. I wanted to enjoy my grandchildren and the fruits of my labor while I was still healthy enough to do so. That same year, I made what I now realize was my first major mistake. Jackson and Amanda had been renting a large home in an exclusive gated community. Property values in our area had skyrocketed, and they complained constantly about being priced out of the market. So for their 5th wedding anniversary, I surprised them with the deed to a magnificent 6,000 square foot home on 3 acres in the most prestigious neighborhood in our county. The property was worth $2.5 million, a significant portion of my liquid assets. My financial advisor Thomas warned against such a large gift. "Brant," he said, "you're being too generous. They need to earn their own way." But I dismissed his concerns. After all, what father doesn't want to provide for his child? The house had 6 bedrooms, a gourmet kitchen, swimming pool, home theater, and even a separate guest house in the back. I thought it would be the perfect family home for generations. The day I handed them the keys, Jackson and Amanda were overjoyed. Amanda hugged me tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You're the most wonderful father-in-law anyone could ask for," she said. Jackson seemed speechless with gratitude. "Dad, I don't know what to say. This is incredible." My heart swelled with pride and joy. This was what I had worked for all those decades to give my family security and comfort beyond anything I had known growing up. If only I had recognized the warning signs that were already there, just beneath the surface. After gifting Jackson and Amanda the house, I sold my own home. At their insistence, I moved into the guest house on their property. "It's perfect, Dad," Jackson had said. "You'll be close to the grandkids, but we'll all have our privacy." The guest house was comfortable enough, 1,000 square feet, with a bedroom, living area, small kitchen, and office where I could manage my investments and remaining business interests. For the first few months, everything seemed wonderful. I had dinner with the family 3 or 4 times a week. I took the twins fishing at the property's small pond. On weekends, Jackson and I would sometimes grab breakfast and talk business. Amanda would invite me to their social gatherings, proudly introducing me as her generous father-in-law. I felt blessed to be so integrated into their lives. But subtle changes began to appear around the 6-month mark. Dinner invitations became less frequent. When I did join them, Amanda would check her watch throughout the meal, making it clear my presence was time-limited. Jackson started taking business calls during our breakfasts, effectively cutting our conversations short. One Saturday morning, I stopped by the main house to see if the twins wanted to go fishing. Through the patio doors, I saw the whole family getting into their SUV, dressed for an outing. When I waved, Jackson looked startled, then walked over. "Oh, Dad, sorry. We're taking the kids to Adventure World today," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "That sounds fun," I replied. "Mind if I join you? My treat for everyone." Jackson glanced back at Amanda, who was buckling the twins into their car seats. Her expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Actually, we promised the kids it would be just us today. Family bonding and all that. Maybe next time?" I nodded and smiled, ignoring the sting of his words. Wasn't I family too? As they drove away, Lucas waved excitedly from the back window. That afternoon I sat alone by the pond, reflecting on how quickly things were changing. The incidents multiplied. Amanda began complaining about my presence to her friends during their coffee gatherings on the patio, not realizing I could overhear from the guest house with the windows open. "It's like having a permanent house guest," she said once. "He's always around, watching us. I feel like we're living in a fishbowl." Her friend had asked, "But isn't it nice having help with the kids?" Amanda scoffed. "He spoils them rotten. undermines our parenting, and Jackson says he's constantly second-guessing business decisions too. Honestly, retirement has made him clingy. Each word was a small cut. I had never intended to intrude. In fact, I made a point of giving them space, only visiting when invited. As for spoiling the twins, isn't that a grandparent's prerogative? And my business advice came from 40 years of experience that had built the very company Jackson now led. At the company, things were changing too. When I would stop by the office quarterly to review financials, I noticed my old office had been converted into a conference room. The staff, many of whom I had personally hired, seemed awkward around me. Conversation stopped when I entered rooms. I was becoming an outsider in the very business I had built from nothing. During one visit, I noticed concerning trends in the company financials. Expenses were up significantly. Profit margins had thinned. The company had taken on substantial debt for an expansion I hadn't been consulted about. When I raised these issues privately with Jackson, his response shocked me. "Dad, business is different now," he said dismissively. "Your conservative approach worked in the old days, but we need to be aggressive to compete. Besides, you're retired. You don't need to worry about this stuff anymore." I backed off, not wanting to create tension. But the businessman in me saw storm clouds gathering. Jackson was making rookie mistakes that could threaten everything I'd built. Back at the property, the atmosphere grew increasingly strained. Amanda began scheduling house maintenance while I was typically at the guest house, leading to disruptive noise. The gardener was instructed to mow near my windows early in the morning. Small inconveniences that felt intentional. The distance between Jackson and me widened. He stopped answering my calls promptly. Our breakfasts ceased entirely. When I texted asking to spend time with the twins, responses came hours later, usually with excuses about how busy their schedule was. One evening, 8 months after I'd gifted them the house, I was invited to dinner to celebrate Jackson's 31st birthday. I spent the afternoon preparing his gift, a vintage watch that had belonged to my father. I arrived at 6 o'clock sharp, gift wrapped and wine in hand, only to find the party in full swing. At least 20 people filled the main house, none of whom I recognized. Amanda greeted me with an air kiss. "Oh, Brant, there you are. We started a little early. Everyone was available, so..." She trailed off, already turning to another guest. I stood awkwardly in the entryway, scanning the room for Jackson. When I found him holding court in the living room, he barely acknowledged my arrival. "Hey, Dad," he called over the heads of his friends. "Grab yourself a drink. I'll catch up with you later." That later never came. Throughout the evening, I drifted from room to room, a stranger at my son's celebration. No one introduced me as Jackson's father. No one engaged me in conversation beyond polite small talk. When cake was served, I stood at the periphery, watching my son blow out candles in the center of his admiring friends. As the evening wound down, I approached Jackson with my gift. "Happy birthday, son," I said, handing him the small package. He opened it carelessly, tearing the paper I'd carefully selected. "Oh, wow. An old watch. Thanks, Dad. Very vintage." He slipped it into his pocket, without even trying it on. I doubted he understood its significance. That night in the guest house, I couldn't sleep. How had we drifted so far apart? When had my presence become an inconvenience? The answers eluded me, but the pain was sharp and clear. The final straw came during a company board meeting 3 weeks later. As chairman, I still had voting rights on major decisions. Jackson proposed using company funds to purchase a vacation property in Aspen, ostensibly for client retreats, but primarily for his family's use. The price tag was $4 million. "This isn't a good use of company resources," I objected. "Our margins are already down 15% year over year. We should be conserving cash, not spending frivolously." Jackson's face flushed with anger. "This is exactly why I didn't want to bring it to the board. Dad's outdated thinking is holding this company back." The room fell silent. In all my years of business, I had never spoken to anyone, employee or otherwise, with such disrespect, let alone my own father. The proposal was tabled for further discussion, but the damage was done. Jackson didn't speak to me for 2 weeks afterward. My attempts to reach out were met with terse texts, claiming he was too busy. I began to wonder if gifting him the house had been the catalyst for this dramatic change in our relationship, or if these feelings had always lurked beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to emerge. As the 1-year anniversary of the house gift approached, I decided to make one more effort to reconnect with Jackson. It also happened to coincide with the 40th anniversary of founding Williams Construction. This milestone seemed like the perfect opportunity to rebuild bridges and remind Jackson of the legacy he was now entrusted with. I texted him and Amanda, "Would love to prepare a special dinner celebrating 40 years of Williams Construction. This Saturday at 6? I'll cook all the family favorites." Amanda replied hours later, "We have plans Saturday, maybe Sunday at 5, but we need to leave by 7 for an event." I swallowed my disappointment at their 2-hour time limit and agreed to Sunday. For the next 3 days, I planned and prepared. I drove 40 miles to a special butcher to get the prime rib that Jackson had always loved for special occasions. I baked Eleanor's famous chocolate cake from her handwritten recipe. I even made homemade ice cream for the twins, churning it the old-fashioned way with a hand crank machine. By Sunday afternoon, the guest house smelled wonderful. I'd set up a dining area on my small patio, with Eleanor's good china and crystal glasses I'd kept in storage. Fresh flowers adorned the table. I'd even found old photos from the early days of the business to share with Jackson, hoping to rekindle his appreciation for our family's history. 5 o'clock came and went. At 5:30, I texted to check if they were running late. No response. At 5:45, I saw their car pull into the driveway. Relief washed over me, until I realized only Jackson and Amanda were getting out. No twins. "Where are Lucas and Lily?" I asked as they approached. "We got a sitter," Amanda replied coolly. "Since we have that event later, it didn't make sense to bring them." My heart sank. I'd especially wanted to see my grandchildren, had prepared their favorites too. But I forced a smile and welcomed them to the table. Dinner began awkwardly. Jackson was glued to his phone, barely acknowledging the food. Amanda picked at her plate, making a show of taking tiny bites. "Not hungry?" I asked her. "Watching my carbs," she replied, though I'd prepared vegetables and salad alongside the prime rib. "The company is doing well," I said, attempting conversation. "I saw the Westridge Center contract came through. That was a project I'd been nurturing for years before retirement." Jackson barely looked up. "We almost lost it. Had to slash margins to compete with Eastland Construction." "That's concerning," I said carefully. "Eastland's work is inferior. We shouldn't be competing on price, but on quality and reputation." Jackson put his phone down with a visible sigh. "Dad, the market's changed. Clients want speed and savings now, not the gold-plated treatment you used to provide." "Gold-plated?" I felt a flare of indignation. Our attention to detail and quality is why Williams Construction has lasted 40 years. That's what we're celebrating tonight. "Is that what this is about?" Amanda interjected. "Another trip down memory lane about how hard you worked and how grateful we should be?" Her words stung like a physical slap. "That's not fair, Amanda. I'm proud of what I built, yes, but more proud of being able to pass it on to Jackson." "Then pass it on," Jackson said sharply. "Stop looking over my shoulder. Stop questioning my decisions. Stop acting like you know better than me how to run things in 2025. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Son, I'm not questioning you out of spite. I'm concerned about some financial decisions I've observed. The debt load is increasing. Profit margins are decreasing. These are warning signs any businessman would recognize." "Any old businessman, maybe?" Jackson muttered. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means your ways are outdated. The market's different. The world's different. All your nitpicking and hovering is just. It's exhausting, Dad." I looked at my son, this young man I'd given everything to, and barely recognized him. Where was the boy who'd been so eager to learn? Who'd looked up to me? Who'd promised his mother he'd always look after me? "I'm just trying to protect your future," I said quietly, "to ensure the company stays strong for you and the twins." "We don't need your protection," Amanda cut in. "We're adults. We can make our own decisions without you constantly judging us." "I don't judge you," I protested. "I've only ever wanted to help." "Help?" Jackson laughed harshly. "What help are you really, Dad? You hang around eating our food, using our facilities, taking up space. You eat but don't help. You're just a burden now." The words hit me like a physical blow. I sat back, stunned into silence. Amanda leaned forward, her eyes cold. "Jackson's right. You've become dead weight. Worthless, really. We're tired of having you around, watching us, judging us. This is our house now, our life. We don't need your outdated advice, or your constant presence." Worthless. The word echoed in my mind. After everything, the business I'd built, the house I'd given them, the love I'd poured into my family, I was worthless to them. I felt something break inside me. Not my heart, it was already in pieces, but something deeper. My illusions, perhaps. The belief that my sacrifices had meant something to them. That blood and love would always triumph over selfishness. But outwardly, I did something that clearly unsettled them. I smiled and nodded, said nothing. Their cruel words hung in the air as I calmly cut another piece of the prime rib I'd spent hours preparing. Jackson looked uncertain for the first time. "Dad? Did you hear what I said?" I nodded again, still smiling slightly. "I heard you perfectly, son." They exchanged glances, clearly expecting an argument, tears, anything but this calm acceptance. The rest of the meal passed in uncomfortable silence. They left without touching the chocolate cake, claiming they were late for their event. I didn't bother telling them it was Eleanor's recipe, made with love just for them. After they drove away, I sat alone at the table as darkness fell. I thought about my life, the early mornings on construction sites, the decades of physical labor, the sacrifices made to build something meaningful. I thought about Eleanor and how heartbroken she would be to see what had become of our family. In that moment, with the stars emerging above me, I made a decision. If I was truly worthless to them, then my presence and my generosity was no longer required. They had shown me who they truly were. Now, it was time to show them who I was. Not just a doting father, but a businessman who understood value and consequences. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I researched and planned. By morning, I knew exactly what needed to be done. The morning after that devastating dinner, I rose early with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. First, I needed to understand exactly what was happening with the company I'd spent my life building. Jackson's dismissive attitude toward my concerns suggested there might be more problems than I realized. I still had login credentials for the company's financial systems, an oversight on Jackson's part, I suppose. For the next 3 hours, I meticulously reviewed every transaction, balance sheet, and financial report from the past year. What I discovered sent ice through my veins. The company's cash reserves, once robust at $12 million, had dwindled to less than $2 million. Debt had increased from zero. I'd always run the business debt-free to nearly $8 million. Most concerning were the numerous personal expenses being charged to the business. Vacations categorized as client development, a $100,000 luxury car listed as a company vehicle, expensive jewelry for Amanda classified as gifts for business partners. This wasn't just poor management, it was potentially fraudulent. As chairman of the board, and still the majority shareholder, I had a fiduciary responsibility to address these issues. But first, I needed legal counsel. I called Michael Sullivan, my attorney for over 30 years, and one of my closest friends. "Michael, I need to see you today. It's urgent." 3 hours later, I sat in Michael's wood-paneled office, laying out everything: the house situation, Jackson's behavior, and the financial irregularities I'd discovered. Michael listened intently, his expression growing more troubled with each revelation. When I finished, He leaned back in his chair and sighed heavily. "Brant, I've been your friend too long not to be blunt. You've created this situation by being too generous. But now we need to protect you and, ultimately, your legacy." He shuffled through some papers on his desk. "Let's start with the house. You say you gifted it to them a year ago?" "Yes, for their anniversary." "Did you complete a formal transfer of ownership? Deed paperwork?" I thought back. I gave them the keys and a symbolic deed in a frame. The actual legal process was supposed to be handled by Jackson, since he said he had a contact who could do it efficiently. Michael raised an eyebrow. "Let me check the property records." After a few minutes on his computer, he looked up with a slight smile. "Well, there's one piece of good news. The house is still legally in your name. Jackson never completed the transfer. Technically, they've been living in your house this whole time." This revelation stunned me. "So, I could ask them to leave?" "Yes." "Sell it out from under them?" "Also yes. It's completely your property." Michael's expression turned serious. "Now, about the company issues. Those are more concerning from a legal standpoint. As majority shareholder and chairman, you have a responsibility to address mismanagement. If these personal expenses being charged to the company came to light in an audit, there could be serious consequences." For the next 2 hours, Michael and I discussed my options. The path forward began to crystallize. I would need to reassert control over both my property and my company. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming, but I needed to set emotions aside and address this practically. The next day, I met with Thomas Harper, my financial advisor. After reviewing the company financials, his assessment was bleak. If this continues, Brant Williams Construction will be bankrupt within 18 months. Jackson is burning through cash and accumulating debt at an unsustainable rate. This isn't just aggressive business strategy. It's reckless endangerment of a 40-year-old company. That afternoon, I discreetly met with Diane Rodriguez, the company's chief financial officer who had worked with me for 20 years before my retirement. Initially hesitant to speak freely, she finally confided her concerns. "I've tried to caution Jackson about his spending, but he won't listen. He says I'm just loyal to you and your old-school ways." She lowered her voice. "There's something else you should know. He's been talking to the board members, trying to get enough votes to remove you as chairman. He's also been meeting with estate lawyers, though I don't know specifically why." The pieces were falling into place. My investigation continued with a call to my insurance agent, who revealed that Jackson had been inquiring about the beneficiaries on my life insurance policies. A visit to my bank confirmed attempts to gain information about my accounts, though fortunately, privacy protocols had prevented any access. What hurt most was discovering, through casual conversation with their regular babysitter, that Jackson and Amanda had been systematically limiting my contact with Lucas and Lily. "They told us not to let you be alone with the kids if you came by while they were out," the young woman admitted uncomfortably. Something about outdated ideas about childcare. Each revelation was another knife twist. But the final discovery came when I overheard Amanda on the phone while I was walking near the main house. "The architect says the guest house renovation plans look great," she told her friend. "Once we convert it to a rental property, it should bring in at least $4,000 a month. Of course, that means figuring out what to do about Brant, but Jackson thinks a retirement community might be best. His dad's health isn't what it used to be, after all." I stood frozen, processing her words. They were planning to evict me from the guest house, a guest house on property I still legally owned, to turn it into a rental income source, and fabricating concerns about my health to justify shipping me off to a retirement home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my small living room, 40 years of memories flooding through my mind. I remembered Jackson as a toddler, following me around with his toy hammer. I recalled teaching him to drive, attending his graduation, walking him through his first construction site as an official employee. I thought about Eleanor, who had made me promise to always take care of our son. But taking care of someone doesn't mean enabling their worst behavior. It doesn't mean allowing them to destroy what you've built, or to treat you with contempt. Sometimes, true love required difficult decision. By morning, I had reached a resolution. I made one more call to Michael. "I've made my decision," I told him. "I want to sell the house." There was a pause before he responded. "Are you certain, Brant? This will irreparably change your relationship with Jackson." I thought about the son who had called me worthless, the daughter-in-law who considered me deadweight, the systematic campaign to push me out of the company I had built, and the lives of the grandchildren I adored. The relationship has already changed, Michael. Now it's time for the circumstances to reflect that reality. With that, the wheels were set in motion for what would become the most painful but necessary chapter of my life. Once I committed to my decision, I moved with the efficiency that had made my construction business successful for 4 decades. Michael arranged a meeting with Catherine Walsh, a discreet, high-end real estate agent who specialized in luxury properties and confidential transactions. "The market for properties in this neighborhood is extremely hot right now," Catherine explained during our first meeting at her office. "Limited inventory, high demand. Your house has exceptional features and acreage. I believe we could list at $2.75 million and likely get multiple offers." "I don't want to list it publicly," I clarified. "I need this handled quietly, without my son's knowledge." Catherine nodded, understanding immediately. "I have several qualified buyers looking for exactly this type of property who would consider a private sale. It would mean accepting a slightly lower price for the convenience and discretion. $2.5 million would be acceptable," I said. "But I have conditions. First, I need to control the timing. Second, the current occupants will need 30 days to vacate after closing. And finally, absolute confidentiality until the deal is done." We shook hands, and Catherine went to work. Meanwhile, I met again with Michael to address the company situation. As majority shareholder, I had the legal right to call a special board meeting and address the financial mismanagement. Michael prepared the necessary documentation, while I gathered evidence of the questionable expenses and decisions. 3 days later, Catherine called with news. "I have a very interested buyer, international businessman looking for a United States property. He's in town for just 48 hours and would like to view the house tomorrow if possible. Jackson and Amanda are taking the twins to visit her parents for the day. The house will be empty from 9 to 6, I replied, having overheard their plans during a rare family breakfast they'd invited me to, probably out of lingering guilt from our disastrous dinner. The next day, I met Catherine and her client, Mr. Zhang, a polite, reserved man who had made his fortune in international shipping. He toured the property efficiently, asking intelligent questions about the construction, mechanical systems, and neighborhood. By the end of the 90-minute viewing, he was ready to make an offer. $2.4 million, all cash, 15-day closing, Catherine relayed. He's willing to accommodate the 30-day vacancy period after closing, but he'd like the guest house to be vacated immediately upon closing so his security team can establish residence. After brief negotiation, we settled at $2.5 million, with all other terms as offered. Mr. Zhang's attorneys would prepare the contracts immediately. As I signed the initial agreement paperwork in Catherine's office later that day, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that I'd found a solution, sorrow that it had come to this, anxiety about the confrontation that would inevitably follow. But beneath it all was a steely resolve. Actions have consequences. Jackson and Amanda had acted with callous disregard for all I'd done for them. Now they would experience the consequences. While the sale proceeded, I took steps to secure my personal belongings and important documents. I found a pleasant 1-bedroom apartment in a nearby town, signing a 6-month lease. I arranged for a storage unit for furniture and keepsakes I couldn't immediately accommodate in the smaller space. I transferred funds to new accounts at different banks, changed passwords on all financial platforms, and updated my estate plan with Michael's guidance. Throughout this process, I maintained a facade of normalcy with Jackson and Amanda. I accepted their occasional dinner invitations, played with the twins when permitted, and never let on that I had overheard Amanda's plans for the guest house. if they noticed my increased absences as I prepared my new apartment. They didn't comment, likely relieved to have me underfoot less often. 12 days after meeting Mr. Zhang, Michael called to confirm the sale was proceeding as planned. All inspections had been completed. Financing, though minimal given the cash nature of the deal, was approved, and we were on track for closing in 3 days. "We need to discuss how you want to handle notification to Jackson and Amanda," Michael said. "Legally, as the property owner, you're only required to provide them with 30 days written notice to vacate. But given the relationship, I had given this considerable thought. Prepare formal written notice. I want it delivered by certified mail to Jackson at the office the day of closing. I don't want to give him any opportunity to interfere with the sale." Michael was quiet for a moment. "Brant, are you absolutely certain this is how you want to handle it? The shock will be significant." I thought about Jackson's words, "You eat but don't help," and Amanda calling me worthless in the beautiful home I had given them out of love. I thought about their plans to evict me from the guest house, their systematic campaign to push me out of my company and limit my access to my grandchildren. "Yes," I said firmly. "It's time they learned that disrespect and ingratitude have consequences. The shock is necessary." The day of closing arrived. I met Mr. Zhang and our respective attorneys at the title company office. The process was straightforward: papers signed, funds transferred, keys handed over, though I retained my own set for the 30-day vacancy period. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the house that I had gifted to my son, the house he had never bothered to legally transfer to his name, belonged to Mr. Zhang. As I left the title company, I called Michael to confirm the eviction notice had been sent by certified mail to Williams Construction headquarters. It would be delivered requiring Jackson's signature, ensuring he couldn't claim it was lost or misdelivered. Then I drove to my new apartment, sat in my recently purchased armchair, and waited for the storm I knew was coming. At 4:17 precisely, my phone rang. Jackson's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It immediately rang again and again. Text messages began flooding in. "What the hell is this eviction notice? Call me immediately. Is this some kind of sick joke?" Finally, a message from Amanda. "How could you do this to your own grandchildren? You monster." I turned off my phone. They had shown me who they were when they thought I was powerless. Now it was my turn to show them who I was when pushed too far. The next morning, I went to the office of Williams Construction for the first time in months. I'd timed my arrival for the weekly executive team meeting that I knew would include Jackson. Diane, the CFO, had kept me informed of the schedule. As I walked through the headquarters I had built, employees stopped and stared. Word of the eviction notice had clearly spread. Some looked shocked, others seemed almost relieved, as if a long simmering tension was finally reaching resolution. I walked directly to the main conference room and opened the door without knocking. Jackson was standing at the head of the table, mid-sentence. His face, already flushed with what I assumed was anger from the eviction notice, turned nearly purple when he saw me. "Dad," he sputtered, "what is the meaning of this? You sold our house?" I remained standing in the doorway, my voice calm and steady. "I sold my house. The house that you never legally transferred to your name, despite a year of opportunity to do so." Jackson looked around the room, clearly uncomfortable having this confrontation in front of his executive team. "Everyone out. Now. I need to speak with my father privately." As the team filed out, many nodding respectfully to me as they passed, I took a seat at the opposite end of the conference table. When we were alone, Jackson exploded. "How could you do this? Where are we supposed to go in 30 days? What about the kids? Have you lost your mind?" I looked at my son, this stranger wearing an expensive suit bought with company money, sitting in a position he had inherited rather than earned, and felt a curious detachment. "Do you remember what you said to me, Jackson? You eat, but don't help. I'm worthless. A burden." I kept my voice level. Those words have consequences. "It was just an argument," he shouted. "Everyone says things they don't mean in arguments." "No," I contradicted quietly. Those words reflected your true feelings. They matched your actions over the past year. The systematic exclusion from family activities, the attempts to remove me as chairman, the plans to renovate the guest house and ship me off to a retirement home. I saw his eyes widen at this last revelation. Yes, I know about that too. You've been spying on us? I've been paying attention. Something you might have done regarding the house deed if you weren't so focused on spending money you haven't earned. Jackson switched tactics, his voice suddenly pleading. Dad, please, reconsider. This will destroy Amanda. The kids love that house, their school, their friends. You have 30 days and $2.5 million from the sale of a company I built from nothing. You'll have to prove you can accomplish something on your own. You can't just throw us out. Actually, I can. Just like you were planning to throw me out of the guest house, I stood up, buttoning my suit jacket. Oh, and there's one more thing. I've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. As majority shareholder, I'll be addressing the financial irregularities I've discovered and your future with this company. The color drained from Jackson's face. What are you saying? I'm saying that actions have consequences, son. You've been using the company as your personal piggy bank. That ends now. I walked to the door, then turned back. Despite everything, I do love you, Jackson. That's why I'm doing this. You need to learn the value of what you've been given before you lose everything. I left him sitting there, staring after me in shock. As painful as this confrontation had been, I knew it was necessary. Sometimes love means making difficult choices. Sometimes it means allowing those we care about to experience the natural consequences of their actions. The hardest part was still to come, explaining to my grandchildren why their world was changing. But I was determined to remain in their lives, to be the steady presence they would need in the turbulent times ahead. I would not abandon them, even if it meant establishing a new relationship with them separate from their parents. That night, alone in my new apartment, I finally allowed myself to grieve for the son I thought I knew, for the family I had tried to build, for the legacy that was now in jeopardy. But beneath the grief was a growing sense of peace. I had spent a lifetime working to provide for others. Now it was time to ensure that provision wasn't squandered through entitlement and disrespect. The certified letter containing the eviction notice arrived at Williams Construction headquarters at precisely 10:45 in the morning. I knew this because Diane, still loyal after decades of working together, texted me the moment it was delivered to Jackson's office. Certified letter arrived. Receptionist just took it to Jackson. He's in a meeting with the Westridge Center clients. I could picture it clearly. Jackson, trying to impress potential clients, being interrupted by an official-looking letter requiring his immediate signature. The confusion on his face turning to shock as he opened it and read the formal language. Notice to vacate premises. Property has been sold. 30 days to remove all belongings. What I hadn't anticipated was Jackson's public reaction. According to Diane's subsequent texts, he had erupted in front of the clients, storming out of the conference room and shouting for his assistant to get my father on the phone right now. When told I wasn't answering, he had thrown his cell phone against the wall hard enough to shatter it, then locked himself in his office for over an hour. By the time he emerged, the news had spread throughout the company. Jackson, disheveled and red-eyed, had stalked through the offices toward the executive suite, where he knew I'd be meeting with Michael and the company's legal team to prepare for the emergency board meeting. The double doors of the conference room burst open as Jackson stormed in. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded, ignoring the others present. "First the house, now you're trying to take the company too." I remained seated, hands folded calmly on the polished table surface. "This isn't the time or place, Jackson. We have a board meeting tomorrow to discuss company matters. As for the house, that matter is closed. The property has been sold." "Sold?" His voice rose to a near shout. "You sold our home without even talking to us? Where are we supposed to go? What about the kids? Do you even care what this will do to them?" Michael attempted to intervene. "Mr. Williams, perhaps we should continue this conversation privately." "Stay out of this, Michael," Jackson snapped. "This is between me and my father. He turned back to me, pointing an accusatory finger. You know what this is? This is elder rage. You're having some kind of senior breakdown. I'm going to fight this. I'll get the sale reversed. I'll claim you're not mentally competent. The room fell silent at this threat. I studied my son's face, contorted with anger, yes, but also fear. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, he was facing consequences he couldn't charm or buy his way out of. You're welcome to pursue that avenue, I said evenly. But I think you'll find Dr. Harrington's recent certification of my excellent mental health rather convincing to any court. Not to mention the documented financial irregularities at the company under your leadership, which demonstrate which of us is exercising better judgment. Jackson's shoulders sagged slightly as the fight began to leave him. Why are you doing this, Dad? Why now? You know why, I replied quietly. You made it abundantly clear that my presence in your life is unwelcome, that I'm worthless to you except for what I can provide materially. So I'm removing myself from your daily life, while ensuring you understand the value of what you've taken for granted. This is about what I said at dinner? That was weeks ago. I was stressed. I didn't mean it literally. Your words matched your actions over the past year, Jackson. The systematic exclusion from family events, the attempts to undermine me at the company, your wife's plans to renovate the guest house and move me to a retirement community. I saw recognition flash in his eyes. Yes, I overheard that conversation. Nothing about your behavior suggests my presence is valued in your life. The others in the room shifted uncomfortably, witnessing this painful family confrontation. Jackson looked around, suddenly aware of his audience, and his expression hardened again. This isn't over, he said coldly. Amanda's father is a lawyer. We'll fight this. Amanda's father specializes in divorce law in another state, I pointed out. But you're welcome to seek any legal counsel you wish. It won't change the fact that I legally owned that house and had every right to sell it. As Jackson turned to leave, I added, one more thing. Lucas and Lily's trust funds are now irrevocable and will be managed by an independent trustee until they turn 25. Your access to those funds has been permanently removed. He froze in the doorway, back stiffening. Without turning around, he asked, what trust funds? The ones I established when they were born. $2 million each. I had planned to tell you about them on their 18th birthdays, but given recent events, I've restructured them for their protection. The implication was clear. I no longer trusted Jackson to act in his children's best financial interests. He left without another word, the door closing quietly behind him. The next 24 hours brought a flurry of activity. Amanda called repeatedly, alternating between tearful pleas and venomous threats. Her parents contacted me, attempting to mediate. Jackson's assistant resigned, unwilling to be caught in the crossfire. All the while, Michael and I prepared for the board meeting that would determine the future leadership of Williams Construction. When the board convened the following morning, the atmosphere was tense. The 7 members, myself included, had all received documentation of the financial irregularities discovered during my investigation. Jackson arrived last, dark circles under his eyes suggesting a sleepless night. For 3 hours, we reviewed evidence of mismanagement, unauthorized personal expenses, risky investments made without proper approval, the alarming increase in company debt, the decline in quality standards that was beginning to damage our reputation in the industry. Jackson attempted to defend his decisions as modernization and aggressive growth strategy, but the numbers told a different story. The vote, when it came, was decisive. Jackson would remain as CEO, but with significantly reduced authority. A financial oversight committee would be established. Major decisions would require full board approval, and comprehensive auditing procedures would be implemented immediately. Most painfully for Jackson, his compensation package was reduced by 40% until the company's financial position improved. As the meeting concluded, Jackson confronted me in the hallway. Happy now? You've humiliated me in front of the board and stolen my home. Anything else you'd like to take from me? I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, loved, provided for, and felt a profound sadness. I haven't taken anything from you that you hadn't already thrown away, Jackson. Your home? You never appreciated it. Your authority at the company? You abused it. My respect? You squandered it with your treatment of me. So this is punishment, he said bitterly. No, son. This is course correction. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is allowing them to experience the consequences of their choices. The next few weeks were difficult for everyone. Jackson and Amanda were forced to find temporary housing while they searched for a new home, one significantly less luxurious than what they had become accustomed to. The twins, confused by the sudden upheaval, asked repeatedly why they had to leave the house with the big yard and swimming pool. I made it clear to Jackson that despite our differences, I wanted to maintain a relationship with Lucas and Lily. After initial resistance, financial reality forced him to accept my offer to watch the children twice weekly while they apartment hunted and worked. Those precious hours with my grandchildren became the bright spots in an otherwise dark period. As the 30-day vacancy period neared its end, I visited the property one last time. Mr. Zhang's security team had already established residence in the guest house, but the main house stood empty, echoing with footsteps as I walked through rooms now stripped of furniture and personal touches. In the kitchen, where we had shared countless family meals in happier times, I found Jackson boxing up the last of their belongings. He looked up as I entered, his expression unreadable. Almost finished, he said flatly. We'll be out by tomorrow, as required. I nodded. Where will you go? We found a 3-bedroom apartment in Riverside Heights. Not exactly what we're used to, but it's what we can afford now. There was a note of accusation in his voice. It's a nice area, I offered. Good schools. Jackson closed the box he'd been packing and sealed it with tape. Why did you come here today? To make sure we're really leaving? No. I moved to the large bay window overlooking the backyard where the twins had once played. I wanted to say goodbye to this place, and to see if you're okay. He laughed bitterly. If I'm okay? You sold our house out from under us, slashed my salary, and humiliated me professionally. What do you think? I turned to face him. I think you're angry and hurt. I think you feel betrayed. I also think, deep down, you know your behavior led us here. For a moment, something flickered across his face, a flash of the sun I remembered, perhaps a glimmer of self-awareness. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the hardened expression I'd grown accustomed to. We'll survive, he said stiffly. We don't have much choice, do we? As I left the property for the final time, I wondered if the rift between us could ever truly heal. Only time would tell if this painful lesson would ultimately save my son from himself, or if I had irreparably damaged our relationship in my attempt to teach him about consequences and gratitude. Either way, I knew I had done what was necessary. Sometimes love requires difficult choices. Sometimes it means standing firm, even when it breaks your heart to do so. 1 year has passed since I sold the house and confronted Jackson about the company mismanagement. So much has changed, yet some things remain painfully the same. I live in a comfortable 2-bedroom condominium now, much more modest than the luxury home I once owned, but perfectly suited to my needs. The walls display photographs of a life well-lived construction projects I completed. Eleanor, in happier days, the twins at various ages. My retirement is secure, thanks to careful financial planning throughout my life, and the proceeds from the house sale that I largely invested rather than spent. Williams Construction has stabilized under the new management structure. The Oversight Committee, which I chair, has eliminated wasteful spending and risky investments. We've returned to the core principles that made the company successful: quality workmanship, ethical business practices, and careful growth. Profits are gradually increasing, and our reputation in the industry has been restored. Jackson remains CEO, though his role is more ceremonial than operational these days. The board makes major decisions collectively, with my guidance still carrying significant weight. To his credit, Jackson has accepted these changes with growing maturity. The humbling experience of having his authority restricted seems to have prompted some genuine self-reflection. My relationship with Jackson remains strained but is slowly improving. The first 3 months after the sale, he barely spoke to me except regarding company matters. Amanda refused to see me entirely. My access to the twins was limited to prearranged visits at neutral locations, always supervised by their nanny. The turning point came unexpectedly, 6 months after they moved into the apartment. Jackson called me late one evening, his voice tight with tension. "Dad, I hate to ask this, but we're in a bind. Amanda's mother was supposed to watch the kids tomorrow while we attend a client dinner, but she's sick. Our regular sitter is unavailable. Would you? Could you? Possibly." "Of course," I said immediately. "What time should I come over?" The apartment was small but tidy, with rental furniture and a few family photos as the only decorations. The twins, now 6, were overjoyed to see me. We spent the evening building Lego structures, reading stories, and talking about their new school. When Jackson and Amanda returned, they found us all asleep on the couch, a children's movie playing in the background. That night seemed to thaw something in our frozen relationship. Jackson began calling more regularly. Amanda, while still cool toward me, stopped actively preventing family interactions. I was invited to Lucas and Lily's birthday party, albeit with the clear understanding that I would not bring extravagant gifts to outshine their more modest celebration. During this period of cautious reconciliation, I found new purpose beyond family matters. I began mentoring young construction industry professionals, sharing the knowledge gained over 40 years in business. 3 days a week, I volunteer at a vocational training center, teaching basic construction skills to at-risk youth and adults seeking career changes. Using $1 million from the house sale, I established a scholarship fund for students pursuing trades education, named in Eleanor's memory. These activities fill my days with meaning and connection. I've made new friends, developed new routines, created a life that feels purposeful despite the family fractures that still pain me. I've learned that happiness in later years doesn't depend on being surrounded by family who take you for granted, but on being engaged in meaningful work and authentic relationships. 9 months after the house sale, Jackson invited me to dinner, just the two of us. We met at a modest family restaurant, a far cry from the expensive establishments he once frequented on the company dime. "You look good, Dad," he said awkwardly as we settled into our booth. "The mentoring program seems to agree with you." "It keeps me busy," I replied. "How are things at the apartment?" He shrugged. "Small, noisy neighbors, but we're managing." He fidgeted with his napkin. "We're looking at houses again. Nothing fancy, just a small place with a yard for the kids. Amanda's gone back to work to help with the down payment." "That's good," I said carefully. "Work gives purpose." Jackson nodded, then took a deep breath. "Dad, I've been doing a lot of thinking this past year. About what happened. About why you did what you did." I waited, giving him space to continue. "I was awful to you," he said finally, his voice low. "The things I said, the way I treated you after everything you'd done for us. Looking back, I barely recognized that person." "What changed?" I asked gently. "Everything," he laughed humorlessly. "Living within a budget for the first time in my adult life, working under oversight at the company. Seeing Amanda adapt to our new circumstances, she's actually happier now that she's working again, though she'd never admit it to you." He met my eyes directly. "Mainly, I've had to face myself. Without all the trappings, without the big house and the fancy car and the executive title, that really meant nothing because it was handed to me rather than earned." "And what have you found in that facing?" "That I didn't like who I was becoming," he admitted quietly. "Entitled, arrogant, ungrateful. I blamed you for everything, because it was easier than taking responsibility." He swallowed hard. "I'm not asking for the house back, or for things to return to how they were. I just wanted you to know that I understand now why you did it, and that I'm sorry, truly sorry." The words I had waited a year to hear. They didn't erase the pain of the past, but they opened a door to a possible future, one in which my son might become the man I had always hoped he would be. "Thank you for saying that," I replied, emotion thickening my voice. "It means a great deal to me." Our conversation that night wasn't a magical fixing of all that had broken between us, but it was a beginning. We talked about the company, about the twins, about Jackson's new perspective on work and money. For the first time in years, we really talked, without the undercurrents of resentment and entitlement that had poisoned our relationship. Today, 1 year after the sale, we've established a new normal. I see the twins weekly, sometimes at their apartment, sometimes at my condo. Jackson and I meet regularly to discuss the company, our conversations increasingly productive as he grows into the role of a true business leader rather than an entitled heir. Amanda remains somewhat distant but civil, perhaps still struggling to adjust to their reduced circumstances. The most valuable lesson I've learned through this painful journey is that true love sometimes requires allowing people to experience the consequences of their actions. By sheltering Jackson from consequences his entire life, by giving him everything without requiring effort or gratitude, I had contributed to the entitlement that nearly destroyed our relationship. The house I sold was just a structure of wood and stone. The legacy I truly wanted to leave my son wasn't financial wealth or material possessions, but values, integrity, work ethic, appreciation for what he had. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children is not what we provide, but what we withhold the easy path that leads to entitlement and ingratitude. If you're watching this and facing similar struggles with entitled family members, remember that enabling their behavior isn't helping them, it's preventing their growth. Setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's an act of love that may save your relationship in the long run. The journey continues for our family. Healing takes time. Trust, once broken, rebuilds slowly. But I see promising signs in Jackson's growing maturity, in his renewed appreciation for the company legacy, in his more mindful parenting of the twins. I don't regret the difficult decision I made a year ago. Sometimes the most painful choices lead to the most necessary growth. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that hurt someone you loved, but ultimately led to positive change? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more life lessons from someone who's learned things the hard way. Thank you for listening. And remember, love without accountability isn't really love at all. It's just enabling. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.